The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand hallways of Kensington Palace as Princess Charlotte raced through the marble corridors, her small shoes echoing against the polished floors. At 8 years old, she had developed a particular fondness for exploring every corner of the royal residence. Much to the concern of her protection officers, Detective Inspector Sarah, Mitchell had been assigned to Charlotte's security detail 6 months ago, and she had quickly learned that the young princess possessed an adventurous spirit that often tested the boundaries of royal protocol. On this particular Tuesday morning, Charlotte had already managed to slip away from her governess twice. Leading Sarah on what felt like an endless game of hide and seek through the palace's numerous rooms and secret passages, the trouble began during Charlotte's morning lessons when her tutor, Mrs. Henderson, had stepped away briefly to fetch additional reading materials. Charlotte, seizing the opportunity, had quietly slipped from her chair and made her way toward the family quarters. She had something urgent on her mind, something that had been bothering her since the previous evening's family dinner. Sarah noticed the princess's absence within minutes and immediately activated the palace's internal communication system. The security team, well trained in handling such situations, began their systematic search protocol. Each guard knew their assigned sections, and within moments, they were quietly moving through the building, careful not to alarm any visiting dignitaries or staff members who might be present. Charlotte's destination was clear in her young mind. She needed to speak with Queen Camilla, her step-grandmother, about something she had overheard the adults discussing the night before. The conversation had confused her, and in her innocent way, she believed that a direct approach would provide the answers she sought. What she didn't realize was that her urgency would soon create a situation that would test the entire security protocol of the royal household. As Charlotte approached the Queen's private wing, she encountered the first checkpoint. Sergeant Williams, a veteran guard with 20 years of palace service, gently intercepted the princess. His training had taught him to handle such situations with both authority and respect for the royal family's unique dynamics. "Your Royal Highness," Sergeant Williams said with a respectful bow, "perhaps we should return you to your lessons. Mrs. Henderson is looking for you." Charlotte, however, was determined. Her small face showed the stubborn resolve that ran in her family bloodline. "I need to see Camilla," she insisted, using the familiar name she had been taught to use in private family settings. "It's very important, and I can't wait." The sergeant found himself in a delicate position. Royal protocol demanded respect for the family's wishes, even those of its youngest members, but security procedures required that he ensure Charlotte's safety and prevent any disruption to the Queen's schedule. He attempted to compromise by suggesting they contact Charlotte's parents first, but the princess was having none of it. Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Mitchell had traced Charlotte's likely path through the security cameras and was making her way toward the Queen's wing. She spoke quietly into her radio, coordinating with other team members to ensure they could resolve the situation quickly and discreetly. The last thing anyone wanted was to create a scene that might embarrass the family or provide fodder for the ever-watchful media. Queen Camilla, unaware of the developing situation, was in her private study reviewing her schedule for the upcoming week. Her lady-in-waiting had just brought her morning tea, and she was enjoying a few moments of quiet before her first official engagement of the day. The Queen's private quarters were designed to provide her with a sanctuary, where she could prepare for her public duties without interruption. Charlotte, growing more frustrated with each passing minute, began to raise her voice. Her calls for Camilla echoed through the corridor, creating exactly the kind of situation the security team had hoped to avoid. Other staff members began to notice the commotion, and word quickly spread through the palace's informal communication. "NETWORK that something unusual was happening in the royal wing, Detective Inspector." Mitchell finally caught up with Charlotte just as the situation was reaching its peak. The princess had managed to get past Sergeant Williams during a moment when he was coordinating with another guard, and she was now standing directly outside the Queen's private bathroom door, calling Camilla's name with increasing volume and urgency. The timing couldn't have been worse. Queen Camilla had just entered her private bathroom to freshen up before her morning meetings, and the sound of Charlotte's voice calling her name repeatedly from the other side of the door created an unprecedented security dilemma. The bathroom, like all private spaces in the royal quarters, was considered absolutely off-limits to unauthorized personnel, including other family members during certain times. Sarah approached carefully, knowing that any wrong move could escalate the situation further. She could hear the concern in Charlotte's voice, and her training told her that the princess was genuinely distressed about something. However, she also knew that protocol demanded immediate action to protect the queen's privacy and maintain the security of her private quarters. The sound of Charlotte's voice had indeed reached Queen Camilla, who was both surprised and concerned to hear her step-granddaughter in such obvious distress. However, her current situation made it impossible for her to immediately respond, creating a standoff that would require careful handling by the security team as more guards arrived on the scene. The situation became increasingly complex. Each passing minute brought new challenges as they tried to balance family relationships, royal protocol, security procedures, and the emotional needs of a confused 8-year-old princess who simply wanted answers to questions that were troubling her young mind. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell assessed the rapidly evolving situation with the calculated precision her training had instilled in her. Charlotte continued calling for Queen Camilla, her young voice carrying a note of desperation that suggested this was far more than a simple childhood whim. The princess stood firmly planted outside the bathroom door, her small hands pressed against the ornate wooden panels as if willing them to open. Sarah knew she had seconds to make a decision that could affect both the immediate safety of the royal family and the long-term trust between Charlotte and her security detail. She had studied the psychological profiles of all family members as part of her preparation for this assignment, and she understood that Charlotte's behavior typically had deeper motivations than most adults recognized. The corridor had become crowded with personnel, each trying to determine their role in resolving the crisis. Sergeant Williams maintained his position near the main entrance to the wing, preventing any unauthorized access while keeping a clear exit route available. 2 additional guards had positioned themselves at strategic points, their presence both protective and intimidating in the confined space. Queen Camilla's voice finally came from behind the bathroom door, carefully controlled but clearly concerned. "Charlotte, darling, I'll be with you in just a moment. Can you wait for me in my sitting room?" The response should have been reassuring, but it only seemed to intensify Charlotte's anxiety. Her voice became more urgent as she pressed closer to the door. "No, Camilla, I need to tell you now. I heard Daddy and Mummy talking about something bad, and they used your name, and I'm scared something's going to happen to you." The revelation changed everything. Sarah immediately understood that Charlotte's behavior wasn't willful disobedience, but genuine fear for her step-grandmother's safety. The 8-year-old had clearly overheard a conversation between Prince William and Princess Catherine that had been taken out of context by her young mind, creating worry that was driving her desperate need for immediate reassurance. Queen Camilla's lady-in-waiting, Mrs. Pemberton, had arrived during the commotion and quickly assessed the emotional undertones of the situation. With over 15 years of experience managing delicate royal family dynamics, she recognized the signs of a child in genuine distress rather than mere misbehavior. "Your Majesty," Mrs. Pemberton called softly through the door. "Princess Charlotte seems quite upset about something she overheard. Perhaps I could help explain things to her while you finish your preparations." But Charlotte shook her head vigorously, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "No, I need Camilla. She needs to know what I heard so she can be safe. What if someone's trying to hurt her like in those movies?" The mention of movies provided another clue to the security team about what might be driving Charlotte's behavior. Like many children her age, she had likely seen age-appropriate films that featured threats to important people, and her imagination had transformed whatever conversation she had overheard into something far more sinister than reality. Sarah made her decision. Security protocols were important, but the emotional well-being of the royal family, including its youngest members, took precedence. She approached Charlotte with the calm demeanor she had learned to project in crisis situations, kneeling to bring herself to the princess's eye level. "Charlotte," Sarah said gently, "I can see you're really worried about Queen Camilla. That shows how much you love her. But right now, we need to make sure everyone stays safe, including you. Can you tell me exactly what you heard?" The princess looked up at Sarah with eyes that reflected both trust and fear. Charlotte had grown comfortable with her protection officer over the past months, recognizing that Sarah genuinely cared about her welfare rather than simply following orders. The relationship they had built became crucial in this moment of crisis. "They said something about Camilla and newspapers and people being angry," Charlotte whispered, her voice trembling. "And Daddy sounded worried, and Mummy said something about security concerns. And I know that means danger because I've heard you use those words before." Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The adult conversation Charlotte had overheard was likely related to the ongoing media, the tension that surrounded the royal family, particularly regarding Queen Camilla's public engagements and the occasional protests that occurred during high-profile events. What sounded routine to adult ears had been transformed into imminent danger in a child's imagination. The bathroom door remained closed, but Queen Camilla's voice carried clearly through the panels. "Charlotte, my dear, I promise you I'm perfectly safe. The conversation you heard was about newspaper stories, not real danger. But I understand why you're frightened, and I want to talk with you about it properly." Mrs. Pemberton stepped forward with a suggestion that demonstrated her understanding of both royal protocol and child psychology. "Perhaps we could arrange for Princess Charlotte to have tea with Her Majesty in the private dining room once she's ready. That would give them time to discuss this properly in a comfortable setting." Charlotte considered this proposal, but her anxiety remained visible. The delay, even a reasonable one, seemed unbearable to her young mind when she believed someone she loved might be in danger. Her emotional state was approaching the point where rational discussion might become impossible, requiring more immediate intervention. Sarah recognized the signs of escalating childhood anxiety and knew that standard security protocols might not be sufficient for this unique situation. The confined space, the presence of multiple authority figures, and Charlotte's growing emotional distress were creating a powder keg that could explode into a full-scale crisis if not handled with extreme care. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the main corridor, indicating that word of the situation had spread beyond the immediate security team. Sarah hoped it was Charlotte's parents arriving to help resolve the situation, but she also knew that too many people in the confined space could overwhelm the already anxious princess and make resolution more difficult. Queen Camilla seemed to sense the growing tension from her position behind the door. Her voice took on the authoritative but gentle tone she had perfected through years of dealing with family crises, preparing to make a decision that would either resolve the situation quickly or potentially create new complications for everyone involved in this unprecedented breach of royal bathroom protocol. The approaching footsteps belonged to Prince William, who had been urgently summoned when Charlotte's disappearance from her lessons was discovered. His expression showed a mixture of concern and mild exasperation as he took in the scene before him, his daughter pressed against Queen Camilla's bathroom door, multiple security personnel positioned throughout the corridor, and the unmistakable tension that suggested this was no ordinary childhood escapade. "Charlotte Elizabeth Diana," William said, using her full name in the tone that every parent reserves for moments of serious misbehavior. "What exactly is going on here?" Charlotte turned toward her father, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. The sound of his voice, combined with the use of her full name, seemed to break through whatever emotional barrier had been holding her together. She ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his legs while continuing to sob about danger and newspapers and things she didn't understand. William lifted his daughter, holding her close while trying to piece together the fragments of information the security team quickly provided. Sarah briefed him on Charlotte's apparent concern for Queen Camilla's safety, based on a conversation she had overheard the previous evening. The prince's expression shifted from annoyance to understanding as he realized what had triggered his daughter's behavior. "Oh, sweetheart," William said softly, stroking Charlotte's hair. "You heard Mummy and me talking about the newspaper articles and the extra security measures for Camilla's upcoming engagements, didn't you?" Charlotte nodded against his shoulder, her sobs beginning to subside as she felt the safety of her father's arms. "I thought someone was going to hurt her like in those movies where bad people chase the important ladies." The innocent honesty of her explanation brought smiles to the faces of several security personnel, despite the seriousness of the protocol breach. Mrs. Pemberton approached with tissues, and Sarah felt some of the tension leaving her shoulders as it became clear that this was a family misunderstanding rather than a genuine security threat. From behind the bathroom door, Queen Camilla's voice carried a note of affection mixed with amusement. "William, perhaps you could explain to our worried granddaughter that the most dangerous thing I face this morning is choosing between the blue dress and the green one for my visit to the children's hospital." William found himself in the unusual position of conducting a family conversation through a closed bathroom door while surrounded by security personnel in what was typically one of the most private areas of the royal residence. He approached the door, still holding Charlotte, who had calmed considerably upon hearing Camilla's familiar voice making light of the situation. "Camilla," William called, "I think we need to have a proper conversation about this. But Charlotte won't settle until she knows you're safe. Would it be possible for you to just open the door briefly so she can see you're all right?" The request created an immediate tension among the security team. Detective Inspector Mitchell found herself in uncharted territory, trying to balance family needs against established protocols that were designed to protect the royal family's privacy and dignity. Never in her training had she encountered a situation that required such delicate negotiation between security procedures and emotional crisis management. "Queen." Camilla's response came after a brief pause, during which everyone could imagine her weighing the unusual request against the obvious distress of her step-granddaughter. "Give me just one moment to make myself presentable, and then I suppose we'll have to break a few rules today." The sound of movement from behind the door indicated that the Queen was preparing to emerge, creating a flurry of activity among the security team. Sarah quickly repositioned herself to maintain sight lines while ensuring maximum privacy for the Queen. Sergeant Williams moved to limit access to the corridor, and Mrs. Pemberton prepared to assist with whatever unconventional family meeting was about to take place. Charlotte lifted her head from her father's shoulder, her face still streaked with tears but showing the first signs of hope since the crisis had begun. The 8-year-old had no understanding of the protocol complexities her emotional outburst had created, but she possessed the intuitive wisdom that comes with loving relationships to know that her concerns were being taken seriously by the adults around her. The bathroom door handle turned slowly, and Queen Camilla emerged wearing an elegant morning robe, her hair perfectly arranged despite the unusual circumstances. She had clearly taken the extra moments not just to compose herself physically, but to prepare for what would likely be remembered as one of the more unusual family conversations in recent royal history. "Now then," Queen Camilla said, opening her arms to Charlotte, who immediately reached for her from William's embrace. "What's all this worry about my safety? Do I look like someone who can't take care of herself?" Charlotte studied her step-grandmother's face carefully, looking for any signs of the danger her imagination had constructed. Finding nothing but warm affection and calm confidence, she felt her remaining anxiety begin to dissolve. The physical presence of the person she had been so worried about provided the reassurance that no amount of explanation through a closed door could have accomplished. William watched the reunion with relief, knowing that his daughter's emotional needs had been met even as he remained aware of the extraordinary breach of protocol that had just occurred. The security team maintained their positions but relaxed their stance, recognizing that the immediate crisis had passed and that they were now dealing with family dynamics rather than security threats. Sarah made a mental note to include this incident in her training recommendations for future security personnel. The intersection of family relationships, childhood psychology, and royal protocol had created a situation that couldn't be resolved. through standard procedures alone, requiring human judgment and flexibility that went beyond traditional security training. Queen Camilla settled into a nearby chair, still holding Charlotte, and prepared to address not just the immediate concern, but the broader question of how much information a curious 8-year-old should have about the realities of royal life in the modern world. The conversation that was about to unfold would require careful navigation between honesty and age-appropriate explanation, all while multiple witnesses stood guard in what had become the most unconventional royal consultation room in palace history. Queen Camilla settled into the ornate chair near the window, adjusting Charlotte on her lap, while the unusual assembly of family members and security personnel found their positions around what had become an impromptu family meeting room. The morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast a warm glow over the scene, lending an almost surreal quality to the unprecedented gathering. "Charlotte, my darling," Queen Camilla began, her voice carrying the gentle authority that had helped her navigate decades of public life. "I want you to understand something very important about the conversations grown-ups have. Sometimes we talk about things that sound scary to little ears, but they're really just part of keeping everyone safe and happy." Charlotte remained curled against her step-grandmother, but her attention was completely focused on the explanation. William positioned himself nearby, ready to help clarify any concepts that might be too complex for his daughter to grasp. The security team maintained their vigilance while trying to provide the family with as much privacy as possible in the unusual circumstances. When Daddy and Mummy talked about newspaper articles and security concerns, Queen Camilla continued, they were discussing the same kind of planning we do before any royal engagement. It's like when you plan a birthday party and you think about who might come and what games to play and whether it might rain. The analogy seemed to resonate with Charlotte, who had recently helped plan her cousin's birthday celebration. Her posture relaxed slightly as the familiar comparison helped her young mind process the abstract concept of security planning. Detective Inspector Mitchell observed the interaction with professional interest, noting how effectively the Queen was managing both the child's emotional needs and the educational aspects of the situation. William took the opportunity to add his perspective, kneeling beside the chair to bring himself closer to Charlotte's level. "Remember how we talked about my job and Mummy's job and how sometimes we have to attend events where lots of people want to see us? Well, part of keeping everyone happy and safe means planning very carefully." But the movies show bad people who want to hurt important ladies," Charlotte said, her voice still carrying traces of the fear that had driven her morning adventure. "And you sounded worried when you talked about Camilla." Queen Camilla exchanged a meaningful look with William, recognizing that this conversation had reached a crucial point. The challenge was providing enough honesty to satisfy Charlotte's intelligence, while avoiding unnecessary anxiety about the realities of royal security concerns. The presence of the security team served as a subtle reminder of just how complex these realities could be. "Charlotte," Queen Camilla said, choosing her words carefully, "sometimes people write things in newspapers that aren't very nice, or they disagree with decisions we make. That's their right in our country, and it's actually a good thing that people can express their opinions. But it means we need to be prepared for different reactions when we appear in public." Sarah watched the explanation unfold, appreciating the delicate balance the Queen was striking between honesty and reassurance. The detective had seen firsthand how media attention could create genuine security challenges, but she also understood the importance of not transferring adult anxieties to children who were still developing their understanding of the world. Mrs. Pemberton quietly signaled to the other staff members, suggesting they provide the family with additional privacy while maintaining necessary security protocols. The corridor gradually cleared of non-essential personnel, creating a more intimate atmosphere that seemed appropriate for the sensitive family discussion taking place. Charlotte considered the explanation, her young mind working to process concepts that many adults found challenging. "So when Daddy sounded worried, he was just being careful? Like when Mummy checks the weather before we go to the park?" "Exactly right," William confirmed, pleased with his daughter's understanding. It's my job to make sure everyone in our family is safe and happy, just like it's Detective Inspector Mitchell's job to help me do that. When we plan ahead for different possibilities, it means we're being responsible, not because we're expecting anything bad to happen. The mention of Sarah's role seemed to reassure Charlotte further. She had developed a comfortable relationship with her protection officer, viewing her as both a friend and a competent adult who could handle any problems that might arise. The connection between her fathers, planning and Sarah's presence provided a concrete example of how security measures worked as prevention rather than response to immediate threats. Queen Camilla seized the opportunity to address the broader question of Charlotte's emotional response to adult conversations. I think we need to establish a new rule in our family. If you ever hear something that worries you, especially about someone's safety, you should ask questions right away rather than letting your imagination create scary stories. But I couldn't find you, Charlotte protested. And everyone said you were busy, and I got more scared while I waited. The comment highlighted one of the fundamental challenges of royal life, the balance between accessibility and privacy, particularly when it came to family relationships. William recognized that they needed to create better systems for handling Charlotte's emotional needs while respecting the practical requirements of royal schedules and security protocols. Sarah stepped forward slightly, offering her perspective as both a security professional and someone who had observed Charlotte's behavior patterns over several months. Your Royal Highness, she addressed Charlotte formally but warmly, perhaps we could create a special signal that means this is really important and I need to talk to someone right now, so that even when people are busy, they know you have something urgent to discuss. The suggestion appealed to Charlotte's sense of having special protocols, making her feel important rather than dismissed. Queen Camilla nodded approvingly at the proposal, recognizing that it addressed both the immediate problem and the broader challenge of helping a child navigate the complexities of royal family dynamics. I think that's an excellent idea, Queen Camilla agreed. And I promise that when you use that signal, someone will always make time to listen to your concerns, even if they can't solve everything immediately. Charlotte seemed satisfied with this arrangement, her crisis-driven anxiety gradually transforming into the more manageable emotions of a child who felt heard and understood by the adults in her life. The immediate danger she had imagined for her step-grandmother had been explained away, replaced by a more sophisticated understanding of how her family managed their public responsibilities. As the immediate emotional crisis subsided, the practical implications of the morning's events began to require attention. Sarah found herself in the unique position of having to write an incident report about a security breach that had been resolved through family counseling rather than enforcement action. The precedent this might set for future protocol decisions weighed heavily on her mind as she observed the continuing conversation between Charlotte and Queen Camilla. Mrs. Pemberton had quietly taken notes throughout the discussion, recognizing that this unconventional family meeting had established several important precedents for handling similar situations in the future. The balance between security requirements and family emotional needs had never been tested quite so dramatically, and the resolution would likely influence palace protocols for years to come. Charlotte remained comfortable on Queen Camilla's lap, but her attention had shifted from fear to curiosity about the complex world of royal responsibilities that she was gradually beginning to understand. Her questions became more practical as her anxiety diminished, reflecting the natural intelligence that would serve her well as she grew into her own public role. Camilla, Charlotte asked, when you go to visit people at the hospital today, will there be newspaper people there? And will some of them write nice things and some of them write not nice things? Queen Camilla appreciated the directness of the question, which demonstrated that Charlotte was beginning to grasp the nuanced reality of public life, rather than the simplified versions typically presented to children. Yes, darling, there will likely be journalists there. Most of them will write about the important work the hospital staff are doing and how much the patients enjoyed their visit. Some might focus on other things like what I'm wearing or who else was there. William watched his daughter process this information, noting how she seemed to be developing a more sophisticated understanding of media attention. The conversation was providing Charlotte with insights that most children her age never needed to consider, but which would be essential for her future role within the royal family. And the security people will be there to make sure everyone follows the rules? Charlotte continued, glancing towards Sarah with growing understanding of her role. That's right, Sarah confirmed, stepping slightly closer to join the conversation. We work with the hospital's own security team and the local police to make sure everyone stays safe and that the Queen can focus on meeting patients and staff without worrying about anything else. The explanation seemed to satisfy Charlotte's need for concrete information about how the adult world managed potential problems. Her crisis-driven imagination was being replaced by factual knowledge, providing her with tools for understanding future situations that might otherwise trigger similar anxiety. Responses. Queen Camilla recognized that this teachable moment extended beyond Charlotte's immediate emotional needs. The conversation was providing an opportunity to begin preparing her step-granddaughter for the realities of royal life while maintaining the innocence appropriate for her age. The balance required careful consideration of how much information to share and how to frame it constructively. Charlotte, Queen Camilla said thoughtfully, I want you to remember something important about our family. We have responsibilities to help people and serve our country, and that means sometimes we face challenges that other families don't have. But we also have wonderful people like Detective Inspector Mitchell and Mrs. Pemberton and all the palace staff who help us meet those responsibilities safely. Charlotte nodded solemnly, seeming to understand that she was being entrusted with important family knowledge. The shift from fear to responsibility reflected her growing maturity and provided hope that future situations might be managed with less drama and more understanding. William decided to address the practical aspects of the morning's events, knowing that Charlotte needed to understand the consequences of her actions while recognizing that her motivations had been loving rather than disruptive. Charlotte, I'm very proud of you for caring so much about Camilla's safety, and I understand why you felt you couldn't wait to make sure she was all right. But next time, we need to find a way to handle these concerns that doesn't disrupt everyone's schedule or create security complications. The gentle correction seemed appropriate to Charlotte, who had grown calmer as she realized that her concerns had been taken seriously rather than dismissed. The balance between accountability and understanding reflected the careful parenting approach that royal children required. Given the unique pressures they would face throughout their lives, Sarah took this opportunity to suggest some practical modifications to their daily routines that might prevent similar situations in the future. Perhaps we could establish regular check-in times when Princess Charlotte could ask questions about things she's heard or concerns she might have, rather than waiting until they become urgent. Mrs. Pemberton added her support to this proposal, recognizing that proactive communication could prevent many potential crises before they developed. I could coordinate with Mrs. Henderson to build discussion time into Princess Charlotte's daily schedule, specifically focused on any questions she might have about family matters or things she's overheard. Queen Camilla found these suggestions practical and thoughtful, addressing not just the immediate situation, but the broader challenge of raising a royal child who was naturally curious about the adult world around her. I think those are excellent ideas, and I want Charlotte to know that she can always ask me questions directly when we have our regular time together. Charlotte seemed pleased with these arrangements, which made her feel important and included rather than managed or controlled. The transformation from crisis to constructive planning demonstrated how effectively the family could work together when faced with unexpected challenges. As the conversation drew toward a natural conclusion, everyone involved began to recognize that the morning's events, while disruptive, had actually strengthened family communication and clarified important protocols for the future. The unconventional setting and circumstances had created opportunities for honest discussion that might not have emerged during more formal family interactions. Sarah, began mentally preparing her incident report, knowing that it would need to capture both the security implications of the event and the successful resolution that had been achieved through family-centered crisis management. The precedent being set could influence how similar situations might be handled in other royal households around the world. 3 hours later, as Queen Camilla prepared for her scheduled departure to the Children's Hospital, the morning's dramatic events had settled into what would likely become part of family legend. Charlotte had returned to her lessons with Mrs. Henderson, but not before extracting promises from both her father and step-grandmother about the new communication protocols they had established during their impromptu corridor conference. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell found herself facing an unprecedented challenge as she attempted to document the morning's events in her official incident report. The standard security forms had no categories for emotional crisis resolved through family therapy in royal bathroom corridor, forcing her to develop new terminology that captured both the security implications and the successful resolution of what could have been a much more serious situation. The report she eventually submitted would become required reading for royal protection officers throughout the Commonwealth, establishing new protocols for handling situations where family dynamics intersected with security concerns. Her recommendations emphasized the importance of understanding individual family members' psychological patterns and emotional triggers as essential components of effective protection strategies. Mrs. Pemberton had spent considerable time briefing Queen Camilla's schedule coordinator about the morning's events, ensuring that future appointments would include flexibility for unexpected family needs. The palace staff had learned valuable lessons about the importance of maintaining family accessibility even within the constraints of royal protocol and security requirements. Prince William reflected on the morning's events as he reviewed his own schedule for the remainder of the day. The incident had highlighted both the challenges and the rewards of raising children within the unique environment of royal life. Charlotte's response to overhearing adult conversations demonstrated both her intelligence and her deep emotional connections to family members, qualities that would serve her well in her future role but which also required careful guidance. Queen Camilla emerged from her private quarters fully prepared for her public engagement, wearing the blue dress she had referenced earlier during the bathroom door conversation. Her lady-in-waiting had ensured that every detail of her appearance met the standards expected for royal public appearances. Despite the unusual circumstances that had marked the beginning of her day as she passed through the corridor where the morning's drama had unfolded, Queen Camilla paused to speak privately with Sarah. Detective Inspector, I want to thank you for your handling of this situation. Your ability to balance security requirements with family needs showed exceptional judgment. Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, knowing that her decisions during the crisis could have easily been questioned by superiors, who might have prioritized protocol over emotional resolution. Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte's genuine concern for your safety was actually quite touching, even if her methods were unconventional. The comment brought a smile to Queen Camilla's face as she considered how the morning's events had revealed important aspects of her step-granddaughter's character. Charlotte's willingness to break rules when she believed someone she loved was in danger showed both courage and loyalty, qualities that would need careful cultivation as she matured into her public role. Meanwhile, Charlotte was demonstrating remarkable focus during her afternoon lessons, suggesting that the resolution of her anxiety had freed her mind for learning rather than worry. Mrs. Henderson reported that the princess seemed more engaged and attentive than she had been in several days, indicating that the emotional burden she had been carrying had been significantly heavier than the adults had realized. The security team conducted their post-incident review in the late afternoon, analyzing each decision point and outcome to identify lessons that could be applied to future situations. The consensus was that while the morning had presented unprecedented challenges, the flexible response had achieved better outcomes. The than rigid adherence to standard protocols might have produced. Sergeant Williams, who had been the first to encounter Charlotte during her determined march toward Queen Camilla's quarters, admitted during the review that traditional security training had not prepared him for negotiating with an emotionally distressed 8-year-old who believed she was protecting a family member from danger. The incident had also prompted discussions among palace staff about the broader implications of raising royal children in an era of constant media attention and public scrutiny. Charlotte's ability to overhear and misinterpret adult conversations about security concerns highlighted the challenge of maintaining both family normalcy and necessary precautions. Queen Camilla's visit to the children's hospital proceeded flawlessly, with no indication that her morning had included an unprecedented family crisis management session conducted through a bathroom door. Her interactions with patients and staff reflected the warmth and genuine concern that had made her step-granddaughter so determined to ensure her safety. The media coverage of the hospital visit focused entirely on the positive impact of the Queen's presence and the important work being done by the medical staff. None of the journalists present had any knowledge of the morning's domestic drama that had preceded the public